Hello everyone. Please excuse my voice. I've still got my cold and I'm sounding all rather bunged up. But I have the house to myself for 20 minutes, so I thought I'd quickly come on and do the tutorial for shadows that you guys asked me to do. So I will crack on with that. I'm going to use my Gulliver picture because I need to do a hell of a lot of shadow work to this one. So you start off by creating a new layer, and you do that in the bottom right hand corner here. There's this little kind of bit of folded over paper. Click on that and you get your new layer here. It's the one highlighted. If you double click on that layer, you can rename it. You don't have to do that step, but I find it useful if I know there's going to be lots of layers on an image. It means that you can easily find the one you're working on. As you can see on this one, I've actually got tons of layers that I've turned off, just so that I can show you with a bit more clarity what I'm doing. So to start, first thing we do is go and get our paintbrush tool, which is this paintbrush tool on the left hand side. Click on it, make sure you've got black selected because we're going to be doing a black shadow. If it's not black there, you can double click on it and just drag it down into this corner. Then we need to check the softness of our brush. For a shadow, I like to set it around 35%-ish. I'm kind of putting that figure out of the area a little bit, it's somewhere down that end. I just don't want it completely soft. I'm going to do some blurring on it anyway, but equally we don't want it to be a really hard brush, and we want the opacity to be up fully at 100%. So you adjust the size of your brush. You can either do that in this in your brush tool drop down up here, or you can use the square brackets on your keyboard to make it the size that you want. So I'm going to just use a brush that's about this big, and then we just paint. And I just follow the kind of size and shape of the actual shoe or object that I'm trying to create a shadow for. So let's just paint a really simple long black line that kind of matches up to the foot. If you're interested, it went behind the foot when I drew that because the foot layer is on top of it in my layers panel. So now we've drawn our line, we need to match it, because you can see at the moment it kind of looks odd. It doesn't really look like the shadow of that foot at all. So the next thing I do is I use the perspective warp tool to move the shadow so that it follows the line of whatever it's hitting. In this instance it's hitting the ground. So we go up to edit, perspective warp, and then you click, and this gives you this is where you set the plane, the existing plane of the thing that you're transforming. So you just drag the corners out. In this instance it's just so that it follows the plane of the shadow that we've drawn, but also make sure that it's got all of the shadow inside the box. So it's actually quite a flat drawing, so something quite straightforward will work. When I'm doing shadows, I'm not too precise with the perspective warp tool. So once you've drawn your square out, we go up to here and click warp. This changed it to the white box, and that's where we start clicking and dragging the corners to match the shadow to the ground. So let's start on this one, and you can see that even just by doing that already it's starting to follow the ground a lot more. So we just work our way around. I tend to play around quite a lot because I can't always visualise what I need to do until I'm playing with it. Maybe one day I'll get better and I'll know exactly what I'm doing, but for now this works. So I just keep moving it until I feel like it's where it would be on the ground. So let's say that's more or less right. So we go up here and click the arrow, and if I go into my history panel, you can see we've gone from that to that by using that tool, which is quite effective. However, it Still doesn't look like the actual shadow. It's too hard for the distance away from the ground that the foot is. Excuse me. If the foot was touching the ground, you'd have a contact shadow which would have quite a hard line, but as the foot's hovering, you need it to be softer. So I'm going to add softness to the shadow by going up to filter and then blur and Gaussian blur. And then all you need to do is adjust your slider depending on how blurry you want it, so you can have not very little blur or so much blur that you can't even see it anymore. So I actually think somewhere around here is probably nice for, maybe there, for the shadow, and click OK. The next thing I tend to do, or rather I'll do in this instance, I don't always need to do it, but is, because I painted just a long straight line and that's not quite the shape of the foot, so what I'm going to do is create a layer mask to mask out some of the areas, basically cut away some of the areas, just to give it a bit more shape, so that it looks a little bit more like the foot shadow. So down here, you've got your layer selected. Down in this bottom right hand corner you can see this square with a circle cut out of it. That's your layer mask tool. If you click it, you notice that a white box gets attached to your layer. With layer masks, you've got to think of as white is revealing everything below, which is why you can still see everything, and black hides it. So if, for example, so hang on, let me make sure my brush is selected and I've got the black selected. If I was to now paint black on this, I'm actually rubbing out that whole shadow because I've hidden it by drawing black on the layer mask here. And then to unhide it, you can paint your white on and that reveals everything again. So that's just very quickly how layer masks work, and it's a great way of working, I find, because it means you're not working distractively. You don't ever lose the image, you're just hiding it or revealing it. So we want to hide a bit of this image of the shadow to create the right shape. So we've got our brush tool and black selected, but this time I want it to be super soft because there's blur on the shadow, and if it's too hard it won't look natural. And I also want to reduce the opacity down to around 30%. This will be dependent on the shadow that you're creating, but somewhere around there should be fine. I'm just going to need to click off, increase the size of the brush a little bit, and then I'm just going to come in very slowly and gradually freehand from the side to take a bit of add in a bit of a foot shape. So you tend to get that bit in the middle where it kind of pinches a bit with a foot. There we go. Not a lot, just enough. So if you can see on my layer mask where I've added colour, or black rather, and then if I go in my history you can see the change that I've made. It's only a subtle one, but I think it kind of really helps to make that shadow look like a foot. Last thing that I will do is change the opacity of the layer, because I think that's just looking a little bit too dark. I really want to see a bit more of the grass coming through, and given where the foot's hovering, I don't think it'd be quite so black. So with your layer selected, you go to opacity here in the layers panel and just drag it until you're kind of happy with how opaque it is. I think there is probably quite nice. And the great thing with shadows is that you can move them around to enhance the effect. That's not really what I mean, but depending on how high you want the object to look like it's floating is where you'd place the shadow. So for example, if I move the shadow here, it still looks like the shadow belongs to the foot, but it looks like the foot's higher off the ground and further forward in the picture. If I put it all the way back here, all of a sudden it looks like the foot's almost kind of touching the ground and it's further back in the image. So you can really play around and just move it until it kind of looks right to you. So I'm going to put that back there-ish. And there we have it. We have a nice shadow for the foot. I hope this has been helpful. I plan on doing more bits like this when I get round to it. It's hard to squeeze them in, but I'd like to. If you have any questions about this, or there's any other ones you'd specifically like me to do, just drop me a line. I'm more than happy to help. Hope you're all having a good day, and I will speak to you soon. Bye.